the local communities, how beneficial a career in oil and gas can be. You guys know there's thousands of jobs, thousands of career paths we can take. Shouldn't have chewed gum up here. Why don't you tell me to spit out? Well, I don't know where to put it now. So, yeah, I'm gonna take my water. So anyway, but that's what we're trying to do really is and we should all be doing that, is get into our schools and, because there's a lot, especially the rural communities, honestly, as far as field hands go and roughnecks, there's kids there that are afraid of work, and then explaining to them that a field job can lead to something prosperous and a great career, So that's really what we are trying to do. We got away from it the last couple of years. The last career fair I did was probably a year and a half ago, so it's something we need to do again.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm going to stick with the contractors on this question, mainly because we have the largest footprint on location. As we slow down, we tend to lay off the most, and as we pick up, we're the ones that have to hire the most people. So Tyler, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think he hit the nail on the head. Just trying to be strategic in the locations that you go to. It's been a big opportunity, and with the hiring events, not only just the a lot of people are working Monday through Friday, looking for advancements, career opportunities, and so it's hard to get those guys in the door at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. So we've been trying marketing our company on the weekends doing hiring events as well. So that's been a big advantage to be able to get the right people, and then the retention part of it. Just the development and growth part, people have been critical. If you win as a team and everybody succeeds at their job, they tend to want to stick around. So we've been increasing our on-the-job training and other development programs.
Amanda, do you want to add anything?
Sure. The only thing I wanted to mention was, our big focus is really on the retention side of it. Recruiting is always a struggle, especially as our world environment is changing. But we have to be able to retain the workforce that we have today. And honestly, they are the ones that are going to be engaging with the new talent coming in. So they are the ones that they see first, and that is what decides whether they stay or not. So our big focus is really on retaining and keeping those employees today engaged. The industry isn't going to be as big as it once was, and so that changes a lot of trajectories for our current employees. So also just trying to provide them with tools and new training abilities to maybe segue them to a part of the company or to a job function that they would have never looked at doing before. So kind of looking outside of that traditional job trajectory, different ways to utilize people's talents and then keep them engaged, because if they're engaged, then the new guys that are coming in are going to be looking to see that there's opportunity, and they're going to be engaged, and word of mouth spreads. So for us, the focus is starting with the retainment and then looking at recruitment.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything operator-wise? No pressure. We'll go to the next question unless you have something.
I would just build on that, on the recruiting and retaining. We've had an internship program since 2009, and really the benefits of that we've seen by keeping it going in the retention piece. By the young kids that we recruit, we immediately turn them around, and they are the recruiters, and that seems to be very beneficial. And they have a little bit of ownership in that process because they actually went through it themselves, and hopefully we'll continue that process going forward.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I'm going to go to the next question. Jonathan, I want to ask you, how do we or your company, Devon, address the supply chain shortages we are dealing with?
I think probably the biggest thing we can do is really diversification of the supply itself. Even our vendor management process, we need to partner with our suppliers and our service companies the best we can. At the same time, it's the right balance between, you don't want all your eggs in one basket, but at the same time you don't want to spread out on too many baskets either. So diversifying where all your supplies are coming from, and also trying to diversify the service companies and services you're getting as well. Now I say that, you flip it back on the casing side, that's always a point of interest to everyone right now. And we're fortunate because a lot of it is tied to the consistency with our amount of activity. For years now, even pre-merger and then post-merger, our level activity has been very consistent for years now. And that's going pretty well for us at the moment because of being on Pipeco, we're a very large customer of theirs, the amount that we ask of them and the consistency associated with that. We're not under any immediate pressure right now going into 2022 and getting casing for that reason. And I think that's true for a lot of things. The consistency in activity and the business that we provide to all the services that help support us. We don't do anything ourselves. There's nothing about that well that Devon drills ourselves. It's all the accumulation of the services provided by everyone. And I think that's the biggest thing, though, is just consistency around the level of activity.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anything else? Anybody want to add unique supply chain issues?
Yeah, I'll add on to what Jonathan was kind of talking about with the diversification of the service providers and their materials and how they're supporting our operations in general. Continental is going from a rig count of 4 as a company to group I mentioned this year for northern and southern regions. So we have to spread that risk across everybody else. So we don't overload any one specific service provider, whether it's downhole tools, cement, frac sand. It just depends. Every facet of our operation can be struggling with the supply chain issues. But other than that, just transparency and honesty with our service providers is what we ask as we transfer into using substitute materials or different components for the same tools. So, that's about it.
How many rigs did you say you're going from 4 to what? I missed that.
Let's see, 4 to,
You don't have to say. I thought you said a number. I'm sorry.
I just said- I just
turned
said-
away, so I'm not going to hold you to it. I apologize. I'm supposed to be the one keeping those.
I'll just say like 8 or 9 in North Dakota, 8 or 9 in Oklahoma.
Can you tell I'm a contractor? Thank you, Abe. I apologize. Anything else, guys, with supply chain stuff? Okay, we'll move to the next one.
I might add that real quick too. To echo what you mentioned, it's a two-way street with all our suppliers and service companies. And it's very important for us to continue to listen to them and their needs. And if there's specific roadblocks being presented on a supplier standpoint, open communication in both ways and be aware of what those constraints are. We may need to pivot, our various service companies may need to pivot, but I think having that open communication awareness from both sides is what's going to help us work through it. The last thing we want is, last minute say, hey, we don't have X, Y, Z, and then we're in a bind, and then vice versa. If we switch designs or make some sudden change and then reach out on the other side and that can't deliver, then we get angry because, we can't get specific service from the service company. So it goes both ways in maintaining that communication.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very unique problem we're having. It's just the contractors, right? Like, we ask to go from however many rigs running, close to 1,000 down to 250, and then we expect our vendors to keep all this extra stuff on hand, whether it's pipe or mud pump parts or whatever, and then we don't buy anything from them for months, almost a year, and it's like, okay, now I'm calling, Patterson's calling, units calling, and then all of us are calling for these things, right? Expendables, and it's like we expect for it to be there.
And it's not just consistency with, I'd say the amount of activity that we have or the amount of operations that we're conducting, but also the designs that we implement, all the way down to BHAs and bits and everything else. If there's consistency around the design, I know from an engineering standpoint that kind of paints us in a tough corner because we always like, we like optionality, we like the ability to change, but even casing design, that's the prime example. If we try to make a sudden bulk change on a well design last minute, that's not going to happen. So we have to have consistency, not just around the level of activity and the suppliers that we have, but also the designs that we're implementing.
Thank you. So this next question, there's a Iadc Young Professionals Committee, and Amanda's been involved, and Tyler and myself. And, this panel today is called Future Leaders, and, being young perspective, right? Like, I feel young, but to a 23-year-old out of college, I'm not young. I have 3 kids, right? I'm an old man. But to a lot of you in here, I am young. So we're currently talking about changing that YP title, right? And so this is a future leader question, but it doesn't mean you're not a leader today. But I'm going to ask Tyler this question. What is the greatest challenge about being a future leader in our industry?
Yeah, I think for any industry, future leaders just learning to inspire and motivate people and continuing to do that, and building a high-performing cross-functional team around you is absolutely critical. And really for us, kind of changing the stigma that's kind of developed around our industry recently, and just helping control that narrative is it's going to be a big part going forwards. The EIA released their 30-year outlook, and they're calling for growth over the next 30 years in our industry. So, we're here to support America. Everybody has to understand that's what our industry does, and we're doing our part. ESGs to be able to maintain our position in the industry.
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge is the perception that we all have. We're always on the defensive, it feels like, and we need to quit being that way. We need to be way more proactive on how beneficial our industry is to civilization. All of the wonderful things that we take for granted is a direct result of affordable, clean, abundant energy. And I think we've lost sight of that, and we spend a lot of time defending our industry and not enough time explaining how great our lives are because of what we do. And I think that's probably our biggest challenge.
I'm glad I twisted your arm. That was a great answer.
I feel like we're taking all this stuff from Amanda and those guys down there. But, so we just had an OERB committee meeting over at the Science Museum yesterday. Has anybody been to the new oil and gas exhibit over there? Does anybody know they had a new oil and gas exhibit? So they did a really good job of this, and one of the sections, areas in that exhibit is they've got on display, hundreds of products made from oil and gas, and just echoing what they said, we need to do a better job of being on the offensive and just telling our story. We know we're not just an energy industry. We're so much more than that, and just being able to show that to people, I think the Science Museum did a great job. So if you guys ever get a chance, this is kind of a plug for them, just because it was great. It was a great exhibit. But just if you have a chance to go talk to your kids' schools or whatever, their sunglasses, their cell phones, their hair products, everything. I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just. I just wanted to echo what they said about being on the offensive and talking about our industry and how good it is and how it affects everybody's lives. So.
Anything from the client side?
I have one more on that. If you guys don't know the name Alex Epstein, you should write that name down. He wrote a tremendous book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. Really good read, and it just really poses the argument of a framework of pro-human flourishing versus the green movement. It's a really good book.
On a separate topic, I think it's unfortunate with every downturn like in 2020 that it gets really deep into our experience with technical professionals out there across the industry for operators and service providers. So I think going forward, I think it's going to be a big hurdle for all leaders going forward. I think there's going to be a bigger cut to see leaders step up and bridge that bigger gap on this 2020. I think we just haven't fully realized how many people aren't coming back to the industry.
I was going to say, bridging the gap is literally what I had written down, because to me, there is a big differential from previous downturns or even just different eras in the industry. We've always had a change of mentality. I know when, I would say, our generation came in, there was a shift that they talked about, and a change in how we view the industry, our jobs, what we expect out of a work-life balance, and it's happening again. But we also have these external pieces along with that, that are influencing both their opinions as well as their mentality of what they expect out of work. So I think bridging that gap between what we have traditionally been, how we traditionally run, meeting people that are still, bringing people that are still on board, and then also reaching out to those that have maybe an opposing view. That's going to be a huge challenge internally and externally, I think, to the industry.
And to add to that same idea, I mean, it's no mystery, and especially to everyone in this room, how difficult it lasts, especially 5 to 6 years, really ever since 2014. That's way don't probably wage price for it in Saudi Arabia, but it's coming through all that, especially on the Devon side. I think back, and I think embracing change and being a master of change leadership is very important for us going forward. If you think back closer to 2014 when we had Welcome established, that was over 100 people we had devoted to that, close to 50 engineers. And there's fantastic things that were developed from that. And then, of course, we were forced to lean down as the years went on. And we had to adapt and change the way that we led and also the way that we worked. There were a lot of things that came from that. And I think we became far more efficient than we were at that point in time, and our performance improved because of that. But being very adaptable to that changing environment, it kind of coincides with the idea, of course, looking forward, we have to lead through the ups and downs of our industry. It's something I don't think it's something that's ever going to go away. It's going to be a part of the industry, probably, point forward. So it's something that we have to embrace and something that we have to continue to look forward and lead through that.
Thank you, guys. This is an operator-specific question, and then the next question is for the contractors, but it's almost the same question. What is the limiting factor for the current drilling programs? Spencer?
I would say we're more and more interested to drill longer laterals, obviously. We see value in that. 2-mile laterals is the norm nowadays. It used to just be 1-mile laterals if we have the acreage, which is probably our limiting factor on how we've actually set up our acreage positions with infrastructure or just the land in general. But if we have the opportunity to go 3 miles, potentially 4 miles, we're interested in those opportunities. And obviously, once you get out past 3 miles, you will encounter some limits beyond the current rig contractor limitations. But that's probably our biggest limiting factor is just the acreage that we have and how to efficiently develop it.
Thank you. Eddie?
I was going to kind of echo some of those same details. Where technically we try to push the envelope as far as all drilling designs, well designs from service locations, hard to reach with extended reach laterals. But another factor I think that's limiting that we're kind of realizing is like we just said before, the supply chain, trained personnel across service providers. That's kind of been a struggling point with some operations and things like that. There's times during the slowdown where we've had a lot of critical equipment leave the basin, and there's only 1 or 2 operators out there that have a coil tubing truck or things like that. And so there's those struggles and those hurdles that we're trying to overcome and bring stuff back to these basins that have kind of slowed down at the time where people have reallocated stuff to the Midland and Delaware Basin.
This is going to go to a little bit higher level in terms of what our limiting factor is. To a great extent, it's really our corporate strategy. To be honest, I mean, I say the industry as a whole, you hear it time and time again, everybody's shifting to more capital discipline. We set it ourselves. Our plan is to be very, very disciplined in terms of our capital spend next year. I don't feel bad saying any of this because it's in our investor presentation, but 2022 we're looking at $2 billion spend, and we're running about 19 to 20 rigs company-wide. It's very consistent and flat activity. And the driver behind that is flat production to some nominal of, maybe up to 5% production growth. And all that ties back to free cash flow and everything else. I know everybody in here is very aware of a lot of that already. But that's probably the limiting factor of a lot of our drilling programs is just the amount of consistency we're looking for in regards to the development activity that we have tied to the capital spend and just a lack of wanting to grow that production from a corporate standpoint. The other thing that I would add too is our large presence, especially in southeast New Mexico, that we have, that I have direct experience with, is from a regulatory standpoint. That's always a big question for us is, what could happen from a regulatory view. A lot of our wells are in federal BLM lands, and so that drives a lot of our plans. We're permitting wells that are, at this point, 3-4 years plus out. So naturally that affects our development strategy. You can't pivot very quickly, so a lot of those wells that are in queue, if you want to make large changes quickly, it prevents doing that. It makes it very, very difficult. So.
Thank you, guys, and I'll shift to the contractor. Kind of the same question. What is the limiting factor for your current rigs you have operating? Jacob, why don't you lead us on?
So it might sound kind of cliche, but we don't have a ton of limits because we're able to adjust to what the operator needs, so, and I think part of being a service provider, that's your job to do, right? So if a certain rig can only drill to a certain depth and they want to do 3-mile laterals with a certain size drill pipe, then we can make those adjustments, right? So from an equipment or rig standpoint, there's really not. We did only build 14 super spec AC rigs when we were building boss rigs, so that I guess could be a limit. We would like to have more, but we do also have some high spec SCR rigs that are perfectly capable of drilling the same wells too. So really, then the limit then comes to, and this would be the talk of anybody, is rig hands, supply, stuff like that. So.
Amanda, let's bounce to you, and then we'll go back to Tyler.
Sure. So what I kind of had down as our limiting factor isn't one thing, which is actually what is the limiting factor. The fact that there are so many different paths that we can go down, and each path that we want to, work with a customer on, whether it's equipment limitation, working on automation, trying to reduce staff, due to either a downturn or just the fact that we're trying to adjust how we do things. If consistency is more important than speed, all of those have a different path that they take us down, and they take time and they take development. And as you guys see, our industry is changing rapidly, so rapidly that we'll start down a path, and all of a sudden that's no longer feasible. It's no longer economic. It's no longer fitting your 5-year plan that only made it a year, right? So I would say for us, that's truly where the struggle comes in of this disputing idea of which direction we should go within the industry, because each operator, each area has its own challenges, and we have to try and fit within each of those, but also have to do it as a business. So just that struggle of resources and capabilities as well as funding is really where we tend to hit a roadblock along the way.
Thank you. Tyler?
Yeah, I think they covered most everything. Right now with our equipment, there's not a well profile that I know of that would have us limited on torque or setback capacity or hook load or pump pressure or flow rates or any the capacities are all there. So based on current well profiles, I think we have a really robust fleet. Some opportunity is just looking at the upgrades that we provide on these rigs to spec them to the fullest tier. A lot of times not necessary for the drilling program, but just keeping that in mind and make sure we have capital in the right place as we spend money on these. Definitely an important part for continuing to grow for our technology.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to leave this one open. I'm going to let whoever wants to grab the mic first. What is the next big innovation that is needed?
rotary stovables that are cheap and never fail. And replace remote pulse telemetry. I mean, one of these days that's going to get replaced, I'm sure, by something mainstream. But I'm gonna pivot on this one a little bit, but it kind of stems off what you're saying, the long laterals. I think that's been I would say an innovation and move that we've made, especially over the last several years. I mean, we've gone as far to, even design our entire rig fleet around long laterals. High torque capacity top drives, larger, higher torque capacity drill pipe, and a focus on long laterals from a development strategy standpoint. But then I would even take it a step further that right now, from an innovation standpoint, probably what's needed more than anything is actually on an ESG standpoint. And the reason I say this is because a second ago, how I mentioned the regulatory environment and how it impacts so much of what we do and maintaining a consistent level of activity for us is advancements actually on the facilities and production side, catering to ESG requirements. So that's actually where I put a large emphasis in terms of innovation at this point in time. I'm getting ahead, but I'll save the rest for further down the line.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm going to nerd out on this one. There's been a tremendous amount of effort on drilling faster. Everyone wants to make more hole. And I think, there's been some. We don't just drill, right? Everyone knows that. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into that. And if you just look at a percentage of time spent on the well, the drilling percentage is getting lower and lower. We're spending a lot more time skidding the rigs, walking the rigs, tripping drill pipe, running casing, nibbling up, all those other things that we all do. I feel like there's some meat on the bone there, and there have been some innovations, quick latch wellheads, quick connect BOPs, all those things. But let's look at running casing. Why do we have to run 40-foot casing joints? Why can't we run 90-foot casing joints? Can we do that operation somehow offline, right? Can we take it off the critical path, or can we just completely change that whole operation to make it more efficient? It's something that I think there's still some room to run, and either put it off the critical path and do it while you're doing something else, or just do it that much faster.
Yeah, so as far as innovations, mentioning that our rigs there's our current well profile that they can't handle, but with the increase in technology, we're currently using the largest commercial cloud computing platform, and with that company, our company is their second largest volume of data moving through their cloud. So that's a huge amount of numbers. I think there's always proof of the numbers. So the more closely we can analyze those, and the more we can lean on those, we can actually find things that will give us opportunities maybe that we don't even know about currently that will continue the innovation on our software and performance.
Thank you.
I just want to add a little bit to that. My answer was definitely along the lines of automation and leveraging the people, the experience, the knowledge that we have. Because as Abe mentioned, with these ups and downs, we lose a little bit of that, and definitely from the contractor side, any kind of uptick or downtick is really a struggle on the people end of things. So if there's anything that we can do to automate or pull off those tasks that can be automated, or use a computer that can make a calculation a million times over in the time that a driller can, creating basically a digital piece that takes away those tasks that maybe we have the expertise today, but we might not in the future, or at least allow them to spend their time elsewhere as they get pulled to try and meet those same efficiencies and those same performance levels. So to me, that's really where our growth should be, is in the automation and automating and digitalizing tasks that don't need a person to make that decision. We're in a technology age. There's a lot of things that we still do in Excel sheets as an industry. So taking the time and effort to make those truly digital and automated, I think that will actually help us leverage and maintain a steady level of performance, even as the industry does continue to see the ups and downs.
Kind of like Jonathan and Amanda said, I got a couple things for the technical. I think, man, a rotary steerable that can stay in the hole, stay on bottom drilling, that's cheap, that'd be amazing. Cheap PWD, so we can understand the CD management. There's so many things that we can do on the technical side and the downhole tools, not just drilling, but production side, getting these horizontals drawn down to the lowest bottom hole pressure. I mean, there's on these high angle tanks, there's still so much room where we can take these advancements technically. I think digitally, there is a big push with big data analytics driving machine learning to make those algorithms and understanding of things automated. And so I think there is some room there for replacing SCADA with IoT and things like that, where we can have a higher resolution of that data, not just for drilling, completion, production, but also transporting our product, refineries, things like that, where we can understand those things in a faster environment and make those decisions faster.
Thank you, guys. We'll go to the next one. Jacob, you kind of mentioned some of this earlier, and Spencer, but you can change anything about the industry. What is it? Somebody grab the mic. I know someone's ready.
You want me to keep talking about what I was talking about? I'll talk all day on it. So I'm a huge proponent of education, huge proponent of whether it's getting in our schools, going to our state capitol, whatever it may be, teaming up with people from the petroleum lines or OERB, or just doing something at your kid's school. Getting out there and getting on the offensive, as Spencer put it, and just changing the perception of our industry. If I could change anything about it, it'd be that people saw us for what we were, and that, the number one provider of almost all goods in the world. We're involved in everything our industry is, so we just need more people to see that and believe it and believe in us. And we give rig tours to teachers. We did 100 last year, pre-COVID, and just that, having the teachers come up to us and say, "You completely changed my perception of the industry just off of one rig visit." How many lives or minds is that going to affect when that teacher goes back to school and she's doing her, she's teaching about Oklahoma history, touching on oil and gas, it's going to change the way she explains that lesson to those kids just from that one visit to one drilling rig. So I think that's the biggest change. Yeah. So changing public perception, I guess is what it is.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this. I would agree. It's 100% image that we need to change. And to me, it's not even getting on the offensive and telling people how important we are. That's knowledge. And honestly, this room is probably a bunch of really technical engineering type people. We love knowledge. Most people don't. They want to know that we care. And to me, the images that we have shown just over our entire industry, it doesn't necessarily portray that. We absolutely have the most heartfelt, generous people in our industry. It's extremely welcoming, but that is not the image that is portrayed out there. So to me, it's even getting off of the subject of what we do and why we're important. And it's a little bit softer. We care. We care about the environment. We care about you as an individual. We want to help, and look at how great the people in our industry are.
Great answer.
So it's nice for me to answer first because everybody has to pick back off of you. So I think they fit all my wish list. Just one opportunity that I see is a partnership with customers and vendors and operators and contractors and just all these different teams that are our industry, and making sure that we prop one another up and be able to achieve goals as an industry. We're still meeting on the phone, and there's an opportunity to figure out what that solution is, and just making sure that we partner together on that to accomplish it. I think it's a critical path forward.
I know, so far we've talked a lot about the perception, probably external, outside of industry, and how we're viewed within our own industry, but I would even flip it around a little bit and due to the cyclical nature that we have, you know, I know there's a lot of people that were historically in the oil and gas industry and decided to leave. And because of the ups and downs that we experience and the constant uncertainty we have, you know, I mean, like everyone in this room, our sentiment has greatly changed just in the last 6 months. If you go back 12 months ago, when we were at negative 40 WTI, we all felt very, very differently than we do today. And, you know, and that sentiment and the unsteadiness of our entire industry, unfortunately, it drove the perception of a lot of us that are in the industry and have been in the industry for quite some time, and forced a lot of friends that I have to leave the industry. So if I could change one thing, it would get that level of consistency. Now that's asking a lot, you know, but I think that'd be the one thing that would change.
I agree. Well, before you go, Abe, that to me, you know, sitting here listening, I didn't prepare answers. I was just going to let you guys do it. But, you know, this is my third, you know, started in 08, then 15, 16, COVID, 2020. I think it's kind of like when 9/11 happened, you know, I still remember where I was when oil was negative $40. Like, I don't know that I'll ever forget that panic, right? I was out hitting rigs, and everybody was scared. And our industry is so cyclical. It's very tough to talk to somebody. That's usually the first thing when you're starting to recruit somebody, right? It's like, oh, come to oil and gas. Yeah, it's a great career. It's like, well, what happens when you guys have a slowdown? It's like, you got to take that chance, buddy. You know, it's like, what do you tell them, right? Because you don't know tomorrow if the oil, what it's going to be. So go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to speak a little bit about the entire misperceptions about our oil and gas industry, about the environmental impact, and things associated with that versus the clean energy. People just like to plug things into the wall, and they don't fully understand where all this energy comes from. Or they like their phone batteries or electric cars. They don't really know the full life cycle of those lithium batteries and how impactful those lithium and cobalt mining processes are, and how much diesel is used on all those truckloads of all those tons of raw materials. And those are in different countries, and I think 2% is done in the United States. So bring that money here and investing it smart, and realize that we're doing our industry much more responsible than we ever have. And so realizing how much we can bring back to the United States, to the people, to schools, to new football fields, everywhere where our operators are operating. You see these new schools and these new football fields and these new facilities that these kids would never have had prior to us being there. And so we make such an impact that I would just wish that we could change that. And we're doing a good job. We just need to keep at it.
Great answers. Okay. Planning, okay. This is for both operator and contractors. We currently and other contractors are doing a lot of. What is your biggest concern when bringing out a stacked rig? Who wants to go first?
I'll start us off. I think the biggest concern is just initially the capital discipline. It's very expensive. We have a robust stack out procedure that pays dividends on the other side of it. But there's still a lot of labor, equipment maintenance, and typically some upgrades involved there. But once you get to this dilution of tenure on the rigs and the rig employees, my biggest concern is just being able to maintain our current culture and keep the safety numbers where they're at now, and make sure that we're still hitting our marks. We've been successful in that. We can't be successful in that without processes. You just can't run a knowledge-based operation with this dilution of tenure. So staying with the processes is critically important, and then just my biggest concern is making sure that we get the right management team to ensure that they follow those processes all the way down to the rig manager location. So that's the only way we've been able to be successful so far. But that's always the thought on my mind. I just make sure we get the right people for the job.
Somebody got.
I'll jump on it. Bringing out a stacked rig has a lot of concerns. I think first and foremost would be safety of all the rig crews that we're bringing together that have not worked together before. B, have different experience levels across the industry or across drilling, but also some that are returning to positions but they haven't been at previously or in a long time. So there's a lot of relearning, but we ask a lot of those rig crews to work together and to do it safe, but perform at a high level. So we ask a lot of those. So my first concern is safety, and then with that team chemistry and all those, when you get all the cylinders firing, performance is going to come right after that, and then NPT will deal with that as we can, and as we need, bring out a stack rigging, might be working some bugs out. But usually, those are my concerns in that order.
He kind of hit exactly what I was going to talk about. Is I have unrealistic expectations written down, and I don't want that to have a negative connotation to it, but more so just usually, especially now when we're bringing out a rig, there are going to be some SSEs on there. So it's nice to work with with an operator that will give you time to spend time with those guys and to properly train them. And they're not going to get all the training they need in just one day. But if we need to take a break and explain to somebody, just like I said, they're not going to. It's kind of hard to explain this when I'm trying to get out. Sorry. Just allowing us to take that time to work with these new people and to give them opportunities to learn to gel with the crew that they got placed on. So between that and then also understanding that, he talked about NPT. Some of these rigs have been stacked for several months, some for a couple of years. There's going to be little goblins that we have to chase down when they start working again. Everything could be 100% completely fine, pass all of our pre-spud inspections and do all that, but trying not to have the NPT held against us in that first 30 or 60 days, because it could happen with a brand new motor, it could happen with one that we're pulling out of stack. So really just kind of trying to manage those expectations and make sure they're not unrealistic for when, it'd be nice to be able to bring a rig out in 2 weeks, but even just finding hands for a rig can sometimes take up to 4 to 6 weeks to do, so we may not even be limited by our equipment at that point. It's just finding employees to work, so.
Yeah, I'll just add on, I wrote down setting expectations. It's truly along those same lines, and we're at that point, in our growth cycle that the rigs that everyone is bringing out, they aren't going to be the cheapest to bring out. They're gonna have some expenses, they're gonna have some time and costs associated with it, along with the people, so when I say setting expectations, I don't even mean between the contractor and the operator, I'm even saying that for myself, making sure that our own people have the right expectations. We just went through the last year with the most experience across all of our rigs. We no longer have that, and it's actually really funny. It's sometimes hard to even put that into your own individuals' employees' heads. They're so used to having that experience that their own expectations for what we're going to come out and do is very high. We actually have to lower it down to safety being the number one. Performance will follow. So that, to me, I 100% agree, but it's expectations across the board.
Yeah, everybody hit on it really well. I think to summarize my thoughts on it, it's crews are number one, and then iron is number two. It's all about the people on the rig. You can have a bad crew and it can take a rig down. It's shocking how fast it can happen if you don't have the right people on it. And I had the same comment about getting that new crew established. Where are they from? What's their experience level? Have they ever worked together? With the whole goal is to build that culture, get a strong culture established, and have the crew gel with one another. That's going to drive the safety culture and the safety performance that we're expecting. So it's yeah.
Thank you, guys. This next one might be fast. I'm going to ask it anyway. Going from stack rigs, planning any new builds in the near future? H&P, Patterson, and unit?
Yeah, we got 5 lined up this year. So we're not building rigs currently. That's obviously not any kind of new news. But if we have 100% utilization with our AC fleet and an operator comes along and they're the right person to go through that venture with, then it's not completely off the table. So I think it's probably the best way to put that, maybe for everybody. I don't know if it's completely off the table, but for us, it's not. If it's the right person comes along, I guess we'll dance.
Yeah, I would say we're always looking to invest in our future. can't necessarily say if that is a new build, new equipment, new automation, wherever that path may be. I already talked about the million places we can go, so I think that's just one of those routes we're always looking at and evaluating.
Yeah, so we've currently got 3 in progress that we're working on this time. We are looking at some other equipment, maybe looking at centerpieces and operating systems and stuff like that as well.
Very nice. I didn't think anybody was. It's good to hear that. We're still trying to convert our DCs to AC, so we'll get there. Moving on to contracts. Are you doing any performance-based contracts? If so, what does it look like, and has the experience been positive or negative?
I'll elaborate a little bit on this for Continental Resources. We elect into any performance-based contracts, and that's not to say that we won't in the future. We just didn't elect to this year. We're going well by well, pad by pad, and to remain flexible, but so we can pivot to any changes in the market or how our strategy changes across our company, or focus. So, but yeah, so we did our due diligence on it. We did a lot of research on it and did a lot of brainstorming on the performance-based contracts. I think there was just a few continuous kind of struggles as far as establishing those KPIs and those metrics and meeting those, but then also continuously improving those in the ownership on where that lies within the contractor, operator, technology, and so forth. So, but it's something that we definitely entertain in the future for Continental.
Yeah, this is from Coterra's standpoint, Legacy Cimarex. We've looked at a lot of proposals, performance-based proposals, and we've evaluated all of those different options. Short story is no, we are not operating under any performance-based contracts. Just a little more color on that is there takes a tremendous amount of upfront work to establish those KPIs, and kind of the lazy answer is we don't have enough time to do that. We have wells to drill, and we have limited staff to do it. I mean, but it's not to say that it's not doable. I think we can get there and we can do it, and it would be effective. But it does require a good amount of effort and time spent on what is it we are trying to measure against, and how are we going to beat that.
Yeah, it's a very similar answer on the Devon side. The answer is no, we don't have any performance-based contracts, and no, we don't have any plans of implementing any performance-based contracts. And to my knowledge, since I've been at Devon, I'm pretty sure we haven't done any performance-based contracts specific to rigs. Now, to add to that, on the completion side, we do have performance-based contracts in place, which is interesting when you think about it, but I view completions as potentially more of a manufacturing process, more so than probably the drilling process is. And to the same point, it's so difficult to establish KPIs. And Delaware Basin is the prime example of this. We've got 40 some odd well types. We're struggling to keep up with what our P50 duration is on most of these wells anyway, just so we can accurately project costs on our 2-year budget cycle. So that's a real challenge to this. And you have to also try and create a value proposition that's fair and comparable on both sides. There's opportunity for the rig contractor and the operator to potentially benefit from it, and then constantly measure that against established KPIs that are already hard to begin with. So we're not planning on doing it for that same reason.
I'm going to quote Scott McClellan just because he's in here, but his famous performance contract quote is a well by well day contract is performance based. If you don't perform, you're done, right? So we have to look at it for certain customers at Cactus, and we haven't gotten there, and I know people have, and it's just an interesting question. Is it the future? Is it going to come and go? Is it going to be, some people do, some people don't. So, sorry, Manny, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in, so H&P, I'm sure all of you know, we are a big proponent of performance contracts, but it only really works with the customers that you can truly get aligned on what is the win-win. I 100% agree with every comment we said. It can take a lot of work up front, not necessarily on establishing a KPI, but you got to find the right fit. There's a million different ways to do a performance contract, and the end result has to be aligned and helping you guys reach your goal, whatever that ultimate goal is, and then ultimately has to also be a win-win from our side. So I will have to say, I've been on the sales side and the ops side of the performance contracts, and it's a lot of work on both ends. But when it does have that alignment, I find it's great. We have gotten really positive results out of them, not necessarily in making more money, in just the relationship that it builds. Everybody is aligned on making sure safety is number one. We ended up having better cultures. It ends up just being a little bit more of a partnership, and how can we both help each other out, and less of a, sometimes it can be a transactional relationship. So to me, it really has helped build that, especially with some of our smaller partners that we've worked with, as they're building up new programs or trying to grow a program. We've really seen that it's been beneficial in maybe some of those instances. So, but I definitely think it depends. It's got to be the right fit for sure.
If we were to do any, this is forward-looking, if we were to do any performance-based contracts, one thing that would intrigue me is to make sure that any of the compensation goes to the crews themselves and not the rig contractor. And that would hopefully would help in retention that we're struggling with as well. But that's...
Thank you, guys. All right, this is going to be the last question. What is your company doing in regards to ESG? I had to throw that question in there.
I'll jump in there. So yeah, as far as the emission standards go and the environmental aspect, we've got 5 fuel engines, we've got 100% natural gas engines, the EcoCell battery pack, Genesis, highline power, so just everything's available and on the table. Utilizing some of our technology, we've got our power management system that we can remote access, so we can actually report what the emissions changes are by utilizing these ESG initiatives or the environmental initiatives on the rigs themselves. So fully calculated and available there for any of the rigs that are operating. Look at historically or instantaneously. We also have our rules exchange engine that we developed to help set up alert systems. We set up a program to alert you on whatever you want for operating rigs to make sure they are operating as efficiently as possible, burning the least amount of fuel as possible, and thereby reducing emissions. The social aspect of it, we've actually had continued involvement with the EEOC, and we push our fundamentals and respectful workplace training, along with the just diversity and inclusion training for everybody, and that guidance comes from the top. So they're the ones really pushing that initiative, and it's 100% involvement throughout the organization on that. So that training is what helps keep us on the same page and push forward.
This is going to be primarily environmental focused. So from a corporate standpoint, our GHG emissions, scope 1 and 2, our target is a 50% reduction by 2030. All that's within our investor deck. How that translates to ourselves, it's interesting though. So when you look at our total emissions, and this is something that we're still, first I'd like to say that kind of where we're at, in my own opinion, another disclaimer, but you know, we're kind of project identification, you know, the quantification of those projects, and then the prioritization around them. You know, what's the overall emissions impact, and then the costs associated with it, and trying to remedy some of those emissions. You know, I think we're still building framework around what all that looks like, and trying to prioritize all those projects as well. On the drilling side, this is where it's getting interesting. So from a numbers standpoint, in terms of the emissions that we report, you know, we're a very small footprint, and we need to do everything we can. There's things that make sense, and we should do everything that we can because it makes sense. It's the right thing to do. But from a drilling standpoint, you're looking at, you know, somewhere between 3 to 5% of our overall corporate emissions of what we're trying to reduce. And that's where it goes back to before, you know, I think, you know, some of the technology and things that we have to push on the facilities and production side, those were probably some of the larger impacts that we can make on the operator side. Going back to the drilling specific side, you know, we're doing everything we can in terms of line power, which line power gets complicated because you go back all the way to, you know, power generation in the state and the source of the power that you're getting via the line. And then, of course, also CNG and field gas. And a lot of times, you know, field gas works out to be the most emissions-friendly process that we can do on the rig side. It's even better. I was trying to make the argument that line power is completely emissions-free in terms of our location, which is still true in my own mind. But you have to track that back down to the generation of the power itself, and then field gas actually becomes, you know, more beneficial from an emissions standpoint at times. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I would say ESG is a huge focus of our company. The merger closed between Cimarex and Cabot. We announced a sustainability group within the company, so that's fully staffed. Prior to that, it was a huge focus for both legacy Cimarex and legacy Cabot. Drilling and completion side, just exactly what you guys echoed. Our footprint's relatively small. When you look at what we do and the biggest impact, a lot of that's flaring. So facilities designed appropriately, limiting the amount of gas for flaring are huge knobs that we can turn and that we're focused on. We've stood up on the production side, we've stood up a control room that we have that has 24/7 access to all of our producing wells, to be able to shut in wells, to be able to alert people of anomalies within those producing wells or facilities. So that's one side. We've actually reevaluated how we build facilities and what types of vessels we use to limit that, the amount of fugitive emissions. So those are all things that we focused on. Completion side, we have a lot of water that we put in the ground, so we're trying to reuse produced water, and we've moved towards almost 100% produced water reuse in our Delaware Basin asset. It's very rare for us to frack with fresh water. And then finally, on the drilling side, we were blessed in our acreage to have adequate infrastructure to be able to run off the grid. And when we're able to run off the grid, we have the rigs capable of doing so. Sorry, on the frac side, that's a huge part of that too. We did a big study on where could we employ an all-electric frac fleet, and we expect that fleet to be operational next year.
We're going along the same lines that Tyler mentioned, looking at all the different options. A lot of it is driven by our operators, also where they work. So, Highline and natural gas is the main driver, looking in the DJ versus here it might be a combination of dual fuel. So really looking at having all those options available as far as the equipment side. But I think one thing that we are really focusing on is really getting our people involved in the entire initiative of ESG. From the environmental side, we have a reward program for individuals that identify potential hazards and remove them. That also applies to mitigating potential spills on site and things like that. So getting them involved in helping us just day-to-day manage our environmental impact, going down and turning off an engine when we don't need it, things like that. And then on the social side, getting them involved in our DE&I initiatives. We just rolled out a One H&P campaign, and a lot of it is about the diversity of thought that we have just in our company as it is today. And it's really been intriguing and a chance to make us closer as a company, which I really enjoy about that. It gets everybody on the same page, working towards the same goals, but it's also meeting our ESG initiatives for Wall Street.
Close us out.
Yeah, I'll close that. It's going to be a quick echo from what the other drilling contractor said. As far as making sure we have the equipment and the abilities to run off the grid, to use dual fuel systems, to get the hands involved, like Amanda was talking about, having incentive programs for them to participate. As far as also being involved in government organizations or oil and gas organizations that work with the government, being involved in organizations that work with the schools. I've probably said it 17 times today about being involved in public education. That's huge for us. So, and me personally, so it works. We align.
Well, thank you guys for. Oh, hey, did you have something? Sorry about that.
I'll just make it short. Continental Resources, we're putting just a big initiative for utilizing dual fuel across all rig lines, and where applicable, we're researching and implementing highline power for our rigs when it's feasible. And same initiatives for the completion side with water recycling facilities in Oklahoma, but also on the production side, reducing flaring and targeting developmental areas with takeaway capacity to reduce any of that potential flaring in the future on those new completions.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I think we all know that ESG stuff, we have the smartest people in the industry. I'm not one of them, but they work for our industry. We're gonna figure this ESG deal out, right? I mean, we're already, the battery power stuff, we're looking at things. We've hired a guy to come work for us. I know most of you guys have engineers already that do this stuff, and it's the future. And whether you like it or not, it's here to stay. So it's time to embrace it and figure out how to make it work, be efficient, be responsible. So, guys, thank you so much for being here. Special thank you to the speakers. I know how busy each and every one of you are. Some of you had to travel here. You guys did a great job. Even Jacob. No, I'm kidding. You did a great job. Jeff, will you come up? We have some business cards. I brought some extra bags from the golf tournament. You draw a couple of those out of there. Well, Wyatt Mindeman, you get a bag afterwards. Come see me. That one doesn't count. McCracken, you get another bag.
Anybody there?
KJ, New Park, that's 3, 2 more. And Stan with Baker Hughes, yep. And Quick Service, Andy Lopez. Okay, you guys come up here and see me. Jeff's going to close us.
This has been a fantastic meeting. We've never done this before, and I want to thank all of our speakers. I also want to thank our board, who kind of said we need to do this. I'm just going to read off the list here real quick. So Greg is our chairman, Amanda is our vice or our co-chair, Steve Jones, treasurer, Emily Matthews sends out all the emails, which we greatly appreciate. And if you're not getting your emails, come up and see one of us afterwards so we can get you on that list. I'm board member at large, which is just the greatest position on the board of all time. Scott McKee, where's Scott? Scott's also past chairman and on the national board. Do you have anything you need to share?
Yes, real quickly, stand up, Thad. So we all enjoy IEDC. Thad is our special guest today. He actually gets paid from IEDC, so full-time staff. And I would say that he's the director for government and industry affairs offshore. He's also in charge of the committee for sustainability. And what I've discovered being involved in IEDC, if you're kind of struggling or you want to share or you want to get involved, you want to make the industry better as part of your own ESG statement or mission, get involved with that and get plugged in. For those of you that, for example, raise your hand if you went to the annual general meeting last week, please. I mean, when I leave that meeting, I'm not very smart, but I'm definitely a lot smarter. So I would really encourage you to go to IEDC's website, iedc.org, and look at the conferences next year and get plugged in. Thad, you have anything to say?
Nothing really. But that was a great plug there, Scott.
Awesome. Well,
If you guys need anything, let me know.
thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.
Also, we have Barry, also former past chairman, and Chris McCracken. So, Chris, thank you. But I just want to tell the board, thank you. This is a fantastic, I hope you guys feel the same way. I thought this was a fantastic way to do a meeting. We need you as service and consulting companies. We need you and you need us. And meetings like this help us get that aligned. I was thinking, would it be something if we could do it the way the world does it? Did anybody notice the sign on the door on the way in? The sign on the door on the right says, due to supply chain restrictions, this door does not work. That would work really good on 1 year rate. Sorry, this motor's down. We're waiting on the line. Or the one, my favorite one is say, please be nice to our employees because we're limited on. So that would look good on a doghouse. Please don't yell at us. Try that, Jacob. Let me know how that works. Yeah. Hey, appreciate your comment on the Science Museum. A couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember me standing up here saying we're making a big push. A lot of the companies in this room gave a lot of money, and because it needed it. I don't know, it was old when I got here 40 years ago, and it's fantastic. So I'm really excited. I appreciate you sharing that. Also, you mentioned a lot on ESG. So Thursday, API has an ESG meeting where Sean Flynn from Continental is speaking, and that's at H&H. So you should be able to get on that. Last one, so next year for 2022, our board's got together, we've already got a lot of great meetings lined up. I certainly hope we do this again. Operator Day is always one of our most popular because we get to hear them talk about their budgets. Appreciate the heads up on the Devon budget already. So, and on top of that, we'll have an economist again with us, technology talk. If there's a topic that you all would like for us to address, please come up and talk to us on that as well. So with all that, really thank you for signing up. Matt Hill, thank you always for taping this for us and posting that. We're adjourned. Thanks.